All right, moving on. Our next athlete is Roger Holmes from the class of 1991. And to do the presentation for Roger is Mr. Tom Evans. Tom went to the dark side when he became the principal at Cuyahoga Heights High School. We used to have a joke about being teachers and administrators when we coached together. But it's my privilege to introduce Tom, who will introduce Roger. You got a few.
That's really good because Bob and I used to refer to principals as non-practitioners, and now I am one. Mr. Parker, please have your daughter call me when she wants. I'll talk her off the ledge about being a principal here, okay? But, no, it's an honor and a pleasure. I'm back principal at my alma mater, and it's great to be able to kind of give back. It's fun to watch Rick up here give his speech because he's a very soft-spoken and seems to be a very reserved man. When he put a football helmet on, he'd knock you right out of your shoes. Absolutely knock you right out of your shoes. And then when I watched him play baseball, everything was calm and under control. But that was fun to watch because Ricky was a special young man. It's my honor to introduce Roger Holmes this evening. When we took over the wrestling program, and I'm going to say we, where's Reverend Hunt at? Pat, still here? It was we, because when I was named the head coach, I said, I'm not doing this without Pat Hunt helping me, and Pat Hunt decided to come along as an assistant coach, and really we couldn't find anybody else to coach with us when we took over the program. The program was 0 for 2 years. I hadn't won a match in 2 years. What we inherited was 60 young men, 60 wrestlers we inherited. Most football teams don't put 60 uniforms on kids. We had 60 wrestlers. And Pat and I decided that when we took over the program, we may not win a match, but nobody was going to outwork us. So the young men that came into the wrestling room were in for quite a shock. We practiced for 3 hours a night. We worked hard. We guaranteed them that no one in Greater Cleveland was working harder than they would, that they would not lose a match because somebody outworked them that week. And we put a lot of time and effort into that. We used to run the hallway right down here around the main office. And again, we'd have 60 kids and we'd put them on a stopwatch. We were trying to condition the kids. And it was really, really good because about the third week of practice, Gordy Billman was the assistant principal. He came out and he says, Tom, I got to talk to you. I said, Gordy, what's up? He says, you got to run someplace else with the kids. I go, what do you mean? Where else am I going to run? This is like the only kind of place we can run the kids. He goes, well, some of the teachers are complaining that your kids are intimidating them when they're running the hallways. And I got a big old smile on my face because I said, that's the first time in 2 years a Berea wrestler intimidated anybody. What we inherited was a group of young men that just wanted to win in the worst way. And, you know, Rob was up talking about swimming, and swimming and wrestling are considered some of the ultimate individual sports. In swimming, you battle yourself and the clock. In wrestling, it's always referred to as a one-on-one, mano-a-mano type thing. But we never took that approach to wrestling. We always took our wrestling approach here at Berea as a team thing, because the kids fed off of each other. And even though they went out on that mat alone, they still had 59 other teammates that were pulling and rooting for them and making them better all the time. So we never ever approached it that way, and I think that much to the demise of our sport has been the approach with it in a lot of fashion, in a lot of ways. When Roger Holmes was a wrestler here at Berea High School during his junior and senior year, the wrestling team went from 0 for 2 years to 24-3. Won 24 dual meets in 2 years and lost 3. And of 3 wins, 1 was to the same school twice, Strongsville, and they were the 2-time conference champions. They were second in the league both years. And I don't think prior to that time Berea had ever been higher than 5th in the league. Roger Holmes was a natural. And he did things instinctively that I could spend my lifetime coaching and never have athletes do. And it's one of those things that just makes it fun. Roger had a lot of fun wrestling too. He did it for the love of the sport. He did it for the love of pushing himself. Roger was a heavyweight, Yeah, back in the days when there was 13 weight classes, now there's a 215-pound weight class. Roger only weighed about 220 pounds, and that was back before they had a limit on the size of the heavyweight. So Roger might be wrestling a kid well over 300 pounds. And as you see in the record book there, 87 wins in his 3-year high school career. Phenomenal. So much so that Roger's best friend in the world, Jermaine Creighton, was our 189-pounder of their junior year. And the senior year, Jermaine had grown and played football at probably about 220. And he didn't come out for wrestling. And I was befuddled by that. Well, it was because his best friend in the world, Roger, and him would have had to go head-to-head every week to earn that varsity spot. Some of the highlights for Roger. Roger was a thrower. And if you're not around wrestling, that may not mean anything to you, but it's probably one of the things that really kind of would catch people. You come to a match and you see a couple big kids, and all of a sudden his feet are up in the air. And Roger did it in a way, and it was kind of funny, and Roger will probably refute me on this point. If I would ask Roger to teach somebody how he did it, he couldn't teach him. Because he did it so instinctively that I don't think he could break it down into how he did it. He used to try for one move that he never hit, and then he'd slide up, and next thing you know, you'd see a 250-pound kid's feet going over top, and next thing you knew, he was laying on his back. One of the highlights of much of his career at Roger, we wrestled in the district championships at Menor, and it was kind of fun because that was when WVIZ would run the finals, the district finals on TV. And we had not had a Berea wrestler in the finals at Menor since, I believe, Scotty Shepard in 1979. And it was 1991 at the time. So quite a span. So Berea wrestler hadn't been on that mat in a long time. And the commentator, Mike Massa, and Brian Brakeman was working with them. They knew nothing about us because they had no reason to follow Berea High School. Because, as I said, we were 0 for 2 years. We didn't wrestle in the big tournaments at the time. We were just starting to build a schedule where we got ourselves into tournaments. So they knew nothing about Roger. They'd never seen Roger wrestle during the course of the year. And he's wrestled a young man from Mayfield, a very well-publicized young man from Mayfield. And Roger goes out in the first 15 seconds of the match, hits his move, and puts the wrestler on his back. And he's holding him there. Now, Pat and I are right at this point in time jumping up and down, and I'm sure that the Menor High School gym is tilting a little bit. And somehow, some way, Roger does not pin him at that point in time in the first period. Again, this is the finals of Menor. The kid gets his way back to his feet and gets back on his base again. And the referee somehow has determined that Roger's not supposed to win this match and warns and hits him for stalling about twice in about 20 seconds. All he did was get Roger mad. So now with about 30 seconds to go, still in the first period of the match, Roger hits his move again, hits the exact same move on the young man. Kid can't stop it, puts the young man on his back and pins him at that time. And I don't think the echoes in the gym have ever stopped since that point in time because we knew, Pat and I knew a couple things for sure, and we always knew that we were the loudest people in the gym when we were in the gym. That was never in question. At 36-0, Roger went to the state meet, and it was prior to double elimination. Now they have double eliminations. As a matter of fact, it was the last year that they had. In other words, your wrestler, if you lost in the early rounds, 16-man bracket, your guy had to get to the finals before you could wrestle back into the tournament. Should I mention his name? I still remember the kid's name, Roger. Skeeter Dillo from Troy, Ohio. Okay. Roger tries a move that he hadn't tried all year, and it was one of those slow motion moments for me as a coach because I'm yelling, no, no. It gets put on his back and gets behind 5 points and proceeds to scramble his way back in the match and hits his patented move again at the end of the match and doesn't get a pin call and loses by 1 point. What frustrated Roger the most about that was that the young man that he had pinned and thrown to his back twice the week before at Menor ended up finishing third in the state, and Roger never got back into the tournament. The next year they changed it to a double elimination tournament, which would have been a whole different story. Roger was a hard worker. Mr. Hunt wanted to remind you, Roger, that you can ask 2 questions when you come up here. Roger was inquisitive. And every time we got on the bus, if Mr. Monahan were here, he would verify that too. We'd get on the bus to go someplace to play a JV football game or reserve football game, and Mr. Monahan would turn to Roger and say, Roger, you got 2 questions. You want to use them now or later? Because Roger always had a question. Always had a question. So Pat says, you got 2 questions tonight, Roger. It's my honor and pleasure to present for induction into the Berea Athletic Hall of Fame, Roger Holmes.
Hello. I was told that I should probably say something funny, but instead I'm going to say something that is true. Behind that black curtain, spent some good years back there. And I remember Reverend Hunt, my junior year, saying that whoever can pin me by the time they graduate will get a steak dinner. It has been over 20 years and I am still waiting for my steak dinner. So, I promise you I will try and make this short. I tried to cut it down and I really tried, but please bear with me. I titled this, Jesus Saved My Soul, Wrestling Saved My Life. Okay. Well, I debated if I should even tell this because this is supposed to be a time of joy and an acknowledgement for things that we've done in our past. And, you know, we've made a name for the school and we've made a name for ourselves. But I feel that when you hear what I have to tell you, you'll find out why I was who I was and why I am who I am now. I am a product of, we'll just call it unconsensual relationships. I grew up in a very abusive home. Both my mother and father were addicted to drugs and alcohol. They would go out many a nights and leave me and my 2 sisters home alone, and they would get high or drunk or both. When they would come back, my father's rage and would just kick in and the abuse would start. And my mom, if she weren't high herself, would try and help us. When she would try and help us, she would get abused as well. And it got to the point to where my mom was fed up. And one night we snuck out the house and it was wintertime. And I know it seems cliche as it was wintertime, but it was. And we were living on the streets and we had nowhere to go. But I guess in my mom's eyes, it's better to live on the streets in the wintertime than to be in an abusive situation that we were in. My mother had to do many things that she was not proud of in order for us to have a place to sleep at night or to have food in our stomach. There would be times when we would go to somebody's house, me and my sister would sleep on the floor, and my mom would disappear for the night, and I'll leave it at that. People may ask me, how can I remember stuff like that happened to me at such a young age? 2 things happen in your life when something traumatic happens. You suppress it or you live through it. I was honored, believe it or not, to live through it. It helped me to be who I am today. Living on the streets of Cleveland, it just was not hard. I lived in Collinwood, and you know, you have a white mother, you have 2 black kids, and Collinwood, where it's predominantly black, it doesn't fare well to you, and it definitely doesn't fare well to your mother, or you know. And my father was he just wasn't there. So after a while, we were off the streets, and we ended up finding a place to live. But that was short-lived because shortly afterwards, our house caught on fire. House caught on fire, and my sister died. Time went on, and we eventually found another place. And though we had a roof over our head, the abuse didn't stop. This time the abuse came from my mother. And I remember one time in particular, my mom took a roll of aluminum foil and proceeded to beat me across the face with it till my eyes were swollen and I couldn't see. And though I don't condone what my mother did, the difference between my mother and my father was that my mom had remorse for what she did. She only expressed what she thought was love because that's what was expressed to her. My father, on the other hand, didn't need a reason. So amongst that and the other abuse, the very last time my mother struck me changed my life forever. I can't remember what it is that I did, but I enraged my mother so much that she stabbed me with a knife. Luckily for me, it was a butter knife, or I wouldn't be standing up here in front of you guys. My mother wanted to apologize for what she did, so she said that I could stay home from school the next day, which was good because I was probably going to get beat up anyway. So I wake up the next morning, I walk into the kitchen, and I see my mom crying. I go up to my mom, and she says, "Roger, come here." And I go to her, she gives me a hug. She says, "I'm sorry, and I love you." And then the next thing I know, I've got this lady telling me, "I need you to come with me." And she's taking my clothes and she's putting them in a car. My mother called Children's Services. For the first time in my life, I fought. I fought so hard because I was not going to let go, and I kept saying, "Mom, I promise you I would never make you mad again. I'll be good. Please just give me one more chance." And I lost the first of many fights. So I was sent to an emergency shelter called Medicine Bomb downtown, or somewhere in Cleveland, I don't remember. And during the 3 months, when I got there, I asked the social worker where I was going to sleep because it was full. And she thought she was going to be funny, and she pointed to the bathroom and said, "Well, you're going to be sleeping in the bathroom because we don't have any room." That's not something you want to say to a little 7, 8-year-old who just was taken away from their parent, So I'm just crying uncontrollably. During the 3 months that I was there, I saw my mother once for a visit on Christmas. And then it would be roughly 6 months before I saw my mom again. So after my 90 days, I was sent to the Berea Children's Home. That was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. It really was. Jim and Chris Maxwell, who I met there, and they're sitting right there. They raised me from the time that I was 9 years old. They took me under their wing, treated me as if I were their own. Okay? Mom and Dad Nieper, sitting right next to them, did the same thing. Mom and Dad Luff, they were there. I had such a supporting cast. So while I was at the children's home, I went camping. Before even that, when I went to the children's home, I was scared. I was in a new area, people I didn't know, but for the first time in my life, and I mean this, I felt safe. I ate when I wanted to eat. I played when I wanted to play. And and when I ate till I was full. Not till the food ran out. I could actually eat till I was full. We would go camping, play basketball, bike rides, swimming, whatever. These are things I had never done before. I would watch Leave It to Beaver and think that only happened on TV, that it never happened in real life, because I never experienced it. So just as I'm getting comfortable living at the children's home, I'm sent to a foster family. The foster family, they were great people. But I was kind of caught in it with a problem because I get a letter from my mom. And in the letter, it sat there and said, "Roger, it's okay for you to call these people Mom and Dad because that's who they are." And that didn't sit right with me. And that was, in an 8-year span, that was the only contact that I had with my mother was that letter. And then I found out that the family wanted to adopt me, and I didn't like that. They were a great family, but at that time I was caught with an identity crisis, not of my sex, but of my race. I knew I was a black man, and I knew I was a white man. I was biracial. But my mother's white. My father was never in the picture. My foster mother's white. I'm sorry, my foster mother at the time was black, and so was my foster father. They were both black. So I was confused. And though I did not mean to hurt them, I did the things that I shouldn't have done, because if I can't be at home with my mom and dad, you're not going to adopt me. I don't care. So I acted out, and it got to the point to where the Neepers came and took me for a week. And for an entire 7 days, I slept behind the couch with a space blanket and ate baked potatoes for dinner. Okay? And so then when that week was up, I was so happy to go back to that foster family. I was about to do cartwheels. My behavior got better, but my foster mother's health got worse, and I had to leave. And when I found out that I was going back to the Neepers, I was terrified. I thought I was going to sleep behind the couch again and only eat chicken. I mean, baked potatoes. But anyway, when I got back to the house, the first thing Mrs. Neeper did was she grabbed me, and she held me, and she hugged me, and she did not let go. And neither did I. And we had chicken for dinner. My behavior improved, somewhat. I was in a private school, Christian Center schools, and that was when the wrestling bug came into my ear, and oddly enough, my teacher's name was Roger. But then just as I got comfortable with the Neepers, I get sent to another foster family, and they just weren't ready to handle somebody like me. And I only lasted for about a month or so there, and then I got sent to another foster family. And I did everything I could, including running away, to get away from them, and it came to the point where I said, you know what, I don't want to be here anymore. And the one thing you don't say to your child is, well, I don't want you here. And that's what he said. He brought me back to the children's home and said, they're your problem now, and he dropped me off. Max and Chris were waiting. Max and Chris said, hey, welcome aboard, blah, blah, blah. You're gonna have to be held more accountable for the things that you do, okay? And it was hard at first, but then I started to grow and I started to mature, and things got easier and easier and easier. And I was never a violent person, but I always had these verbal outbursts. I was never physically violent, just more verbal. And because of the fact that proof that I was not a violent person was I had an opportunity to stand up for myself. And instead, I hid in a bathroom for an hour because I was afraid to fight one of the people that lived in the group home with me. But time went on, and I realized that I was getting older and I was getting stronger, and if I couldn't find a way to control my anger, then people were gonna really look at me differently. So 8th grade came around and I wanted to play football. And Max and Chris said, oh, well, in order to play football, you have to maintain a C average. I messed around and got A's and B's. So then wrestling came around. I said, oh, well, let me try wrestling. And well, Max and Chris said, well, in order for you to wrestle, you have to maintain a B average. Well, I took that as a challenge. And I loved wrestling so much that it was no problem for me to keep my grades up. Because all my life I was getting it handed to me, just getting bullied, and even bullied at the children's home. And I finally found something that I could just beat the snot out of somebody and not get in trouble for it. You know, I mean, people, hey, Roger, good job, blah, blah, blah. So, like I said, I was growing, I was having my good days and I was having my bad days. And one morning, Max and Chris said, hey, get up, it's time to go to church. And they were upset with me because I was supposed to wash my clothes the night before, and all I heard was like Charlie Brown's teachers with the rap, rap, rap. And so Max said, here, throw these on. He gave me a pair of his pants, which were like 3 sizes too big, and a shirt to go with it. And we were at Cleveland Baptist Church, and I was about to fall asleep, and then I heard the pastor say, if you were to die today, do you know if you'd go to heaven? And it woke me up. And I actually woke up, and I listened to him, and he was telling a story about a friend of his who was a non-believer, who he kept trying to get him to become saved, and he just kept saying no. And then when he finally decided to be saved, it was too late, because by the time the pastor got to the hospital, the man died. Now, I don't know if the pastor made that story up, but I do know this. with those big baggy pants and that shirt. I stood up, walked up front, dropped to my knees. That's how Jesus saved my life, or saved my soul. Because I had so much aggression and so much anger, wrestling was my outlet. As a freshman, we went 12-1, I think, as freshmen. And I remember hearing Coach Hunt say, "No one beats our freshmen, no one beats our freshmen, no one beats our freshmen." Unfortunately, I had a broken thumb, and my season was ended rather quickly. After like 13 matches, I was done. My sophomore year was kind of a weird year. I think I was like 24-1 or 24-2 or something like that. And this was the defining moment in my wrestling career because I was wrestling JV and varsity. And I wanted to be eligible for the JV tournament, and we were wrestling against Medina. And I'm sorry, I'll make it quick, I'm sorry. We were wrestling against Medina, and I did not want to wrestle their heavyweight because I was a sophomore, he was a senior, and I was afraid to lose because I had not lost yet. And I got in an argument with Coach Snyder, and it got to the point where I even put my clothes on and headed back to the school bus. And Reverend Hunt came and he stopped me and he calmed me down, and I wrestled JV. My friend Jermaine, who Mr. Evans made me feel so guilty about all of a sudden, wrestled varsity that match, and he won. That Thursday, the Berea Sun newspaper came out, and there was an article in there from Mr. Schneider, and it said, Rogers is a dynamite wrestler, he just doesn't understand his potential. From that day on, I made a promise to myself that I would never, ever back down from anyone or anything again. And I had to keep my word on that because that following week, we had to go up against Normandy. I weighed 190 pounds, and their wrestler weighed 274. By the time the third quarter came, I was down 8-0. Third period rather. By the time the third period was done, I beat them 10-8. That was a confidence booster that I needed. My junior year was a kind of the summer of my sophomore year going into my junior year, it was kind of weird. Chris says, "Hey, Roger, you have a phone call from a Mr. Evans." I thought it was Mr. Harl Evans, and he found out that I had a crush on his daughter. So when I answered the phone, it was Tom Evans, and he said, "Hey, Roger, this is Coach Evans. I just want you to know I'm going to be the new wrestling coach, and I'll see you." I said, "I'm going to be the new wrestling coach, so I just wanted to call everybody and let them know. Oh, by the way, you're going to be entering the Ohio Sports Festival tournament." I said, "Okay," and I hung up. And I'm like, who's this man telling me what I'm going to do during my summer vacations? So long story short, I entered the tournament. But our junior year was special because we had Coach Porter, Coach Hunt, Mr. Evans, and it was just like he said, just the nucleus of the people that we had. And even our senior year, though we had 2 more losses, it was just such a dynamite team. I got to wrestle with people like Jason Whitman, Bobby Bland, Daryl and Chuck Schroeder, and Brian and Scott and Naya. I mean, I'm like, wow, I get to wrestle with these people, okay? Because I felt honored that I get to wrestle with them. People like Billy Hunt. I mean, these were the people that didn't even want to talk to me at first. At least I felt that. So I'm going to wrap this up, but when the district tournament came around, I had a lot of coaches from colleges talking to me. And when I won districts, I had even more of them talking to me when I went to states, and I was projected to be the Division I state champion. When I lost to good old Skeeter, I realized that it's amazing how fast people forget your name when you lose. It doesn't matter how well you did during the season. It doesn't matter what record you broke. What matters is how you finished. But to tell you the truth, that didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was how happy I made my coaches, how happy I made my teammates, how happy I made Max and Chris and the Neepers and the Luffs, and just most importantly, how happy wrestling made me. And that is how wrestling saved my life. Thank you.
All right.